In the previous episode, I showed you how to manage multiple nested models in a single form. So here we have a survey model, which we're editing, and a survey has many questions, and each question has many answers. Now I showed you how you can handle all of these in a single form using the accepts nested attributes for method inside your model, which allows you to create and update and destroy nested records easily through a single model. Now currently, if you wanted to remove records, you would have to use this checkbox, and also there's no way to add records once you've created a survey. We can't add questions and answers through this form here because there's no link to do so. But I want to show you how to use JavaScript to make links for removing records and then creating records dynamically through the single form. Now because we'll be using JavaScript, I'm going to include prototype in our application layout file here. You can use jQuery too, just as easily. I'm going to include some code at the end if you want to use this in jQuery. But here, let's just use prototype. I'll just include defaults, and sure, we'll keep caching enabled just so it's a little faster in production. We'll tackle the easiest problem first, and that is using a link instead of a checkbox for removing records in our survey, removing answers and questions. Let's start with the answers first. Currently we have a checkbox for that destroy attribute that is passing in, and we still want to pass this underscore destroy attribute, but we want to do it through invisible way, basically a hidden field. So we'll use a hidden field here. So this way we can set this hidden field value to true or false depending on if it should be destroyed and if we click on a link, and we can do that through JavaScript. So this means we can change this remove label here to actually a link, and we can use link to function here, call it remove, and then the name of the function, we'll just make up something called remove fields, and we'll just pass it this current element so that we have something to grab onto so that we can remove the fields surrounding this element. And because there's currently no way to access all the fields in this area, I like to have a more concrete way to access fields, and for that I'm going to just create a class here called fields, and that way it will know that everything embedded in the class fields should be removed. And now all we need to do is write that remove fields function in JavaScript. So I'm going to do this inside of the application.js file, which is included automatically when we include the defaults. And so in here, what I want to do is create a new function called remove fields, and it will accept that link tag which is passed in, which is this element which I passed in earlier. And then in here what we want to do is basically first we want to fetch the hidden field which is next to the link, which is right before it. And we can do that by accessing the link element, and then in here we can access the previous element in here who's an input tag type where the type is a hidden field. And then we just set the value of that to 1, and that will tell it basically to destroy that record. And then we also need to hide those fields, and we could do that by again grabbing the link tag, and then we want to go up the DOM tree and just basically grab the first element it finds whose class is fields, and then we want to hide that one, and there we go. So now when we reload the page here, we have a link for removing. Click it, and it actually removes all those fields for that record and sets that destroy attribute to true. And we can try submitting this, and sure enough, all those other answers records have been removed from the survey. But we want to do the same thing for questions too, so we need a remove link for the questions. Now, because the behavior of removing a question is basically the same as removing an answer, I like to extract this into a helper method so that we can easily add a remove link whenever we need to with a single call. So let's call it link to remove fields, and we'll pass in the name of the link, and then also we'll need to pass in that f variable because we're adding a hidden field to it. So inside of our application helper, we'll create a new method in here called link to remove fields, accepts the name of the link and that f variable, and then we'll just add these two method calls together, link to the name of the link. And I think that's it. So that way it'll just add both the hidden field and the link itself. And now we can use that helper method inside of our question field's partial. So I'm actually going to place the link up here next to the word question. I'll just call link to remove fields, and then let's just call it remove, and then pass in that f variable in there. And we also need to have that some kind of tag or element with the class of fields so that it knows which fields to remove, and we want it to surround the entire thing here. So we'll just add a div with a class of fields here, so that way it'll just remove all of these, including all the answers to the question when we remove it. Let's give this a try, reload here, and now we have a link for removing questions. Let's click it, and now that question disappeared. Hit submit, and that question is gone from the actual record as well. Alright, so now it's time to tackle the hard part, the tricky part, which is adding more questions and answers. So when we click on an add answer or add question link, it actually adds fields here dynamically as well. Now what makes this so difficult is that in JavaScript it will have to have access to a blank set of fields for creating new answers and new questions. It'll have to have that on the client side, so when we click on add an answer, it basically inserts that blank copy of the fields into here as well. Now for the sake of time, I'm just going to paste in the code here and then explain it a bit. So here in our application helper, I'm going to add a new method called link to add fields. And you can use this link or method whenever you want to add a link for, adding questions or adding answers or some nested model in a form. And the first argument here is the name of the link, such as add questions. The second one here is that form builder object. The third one is the name of the association, in this case, questions or answers. And now this first line is basically building an instance of that new object. So if it's a question, it'll just create a new question instance, so that way it has kind of a template object to use for the new fields. And the second part here is what we're doing is basically creating a string of the fields, which is going to insert every time we click the link. And so we're going to basically create a new set of fields using fields for, and then rendering that underscore fields partial, so question fields or answer fields partial for each set of fields. So that way we have kind of this new fresh blank set of fields, which is based off of this new object we set here. So the only unique part about this is this child index we're setting here, and we're doing this so that we have something to refer to for creating the new fields for this new answer or question. So that way in JavaScript what we're going to do is replace this new questions or new answers string here with a unique value which we based off the current time. So that way every time we create a new question or new answer, it'll have a unique index so that it'll be identified separately when we submit our parameters in our form. And then finally we're going to use that link to function method again, passing in the name of our link, and then right here we're just going to set it to trigger a JavaScript function called add fields, pass in our association and the escaped set of fields, which is going to be inserted every time we add a question or answer. Okay, so now on to our application.js file where we can add the JavaScript which will get triggered. So it was called add fields, and it takes those three arguments, the link element which gets passed in, the name of the association, such as questions or answers, and the content, which is going to be the HTML content for the fields that gets inserted when we click the link. So the first thing we need to do here is actually generate a new index or ID for this set of fields, because we don't want every new question or new answer, if we click on that link multiple times, to have the same index value, because then it will be considered basically the same model when it gets inserted. We need it to be unique, and this is why we get the time here, so that way it gets the current time, so it's a unique ID every time. And what we want to do is replace that new underscore association index that we had assigned before with the current time. And so we just replace that here, and we're basically inserting this set of fields right before that link, which adds the fields. Okay, so hopefully you're able to keep up, and that's pretty much just the trickiest part of this whole ordeal. So what we want to do here is just add a link for adding questions and answers. So here I am in the questions fields partial, and I want to just add a link here for inserting answers. And so it'll just be called link to add fields, and it'll just be called add a answer. And then we'll pass in our form builder object and the name of the association. So in this case, it's answers, because question has many answers. And then we want to do basically the same thing inside of our survey form, where we just add a question, and then on our form object, form builder, we just use the questions association for our survey. So now we can try this out. When we hit reload, we now have an add answer, and on the bottom here, an add question link. We click on it, we can add questions and add answers, just like we want, all done dynamically through JavaScript. So let's click submit here. So now we've inserted a question and an answer. So that's how you can add records through JavaScript and through nested form fields. Now I did promise you some JavaScript code that would work with jQuery, and here's what that jQuery solution looks like. It's a pretty direct translation from the prototype version. It's just using, well, jQuery. I'll post this code in the show notes along with the prototype version so that you could just copy and paste it from there on whichever library you choose. Now I know some of you might be crying a little bit inside because this JavaScript is not unobtrusive. Now I'm all for unobtrusive JavaScript, but unfortunately I wasn't able to find a solution simple enough to present through this episode. However, I am working on a plugin called Nested Form, which uses jQuery unobtrusively for handling form fields dynamically like I showed here. However, it's still very early in development, but I just wanted to mention that here so you can keep an eye out for it and try it in the near future. Well, that's it for this episode on adding and removing form fields dynamically through JavaScript. I hope you found it helpful.